The first time my brother told me to leave, it wasn't loud. It was quiet enough to feel deliberate. You shouldn't be here anymore. The wind shifted through the cemetery, dragging dry leaves across the gravel path like something restless. I didn't look at him at first. I kept my eyes on the headstone, our father's name carved too cleanly for someone who had lived so messily. I come every Sunday, I said. I know, Daniel replied. That's exactly why I'm saying it. If you've ever been judged before anyone knew your story, you'll understand this. There's a very specific kind of accusation that doesn't need to raise its voice. It just settles into the air like it belongs there, like it's always been true. And if you're here with me, I added quietly, almost absently, make sure you subscribe. It's free, and let me know where you're watching from. It genuinely means a lot to me. Daniel gave me a look like he didn't recognize me. Then again, he never really had. You didn't care about him when he was alive, he said, folding his arms. That was new. Not the accusation itself, but the confidence behind it. I brushed dirt from my palms and stood up slowly, giving myself time to choose my response instead of reacting. That's convenient, I said, now that he can't contradict you. Daniel exhaled sharply, as if I'd proven his point. This isn't about me, he said. It's about respect. For who? For him, for the family, for what people think when they see you here pretending. I'm not pretending anything. He took a step closer. Oh, you didn't visit him in the hospital. I did. Once. That's not true. It is, he said, flat. I was there every day. You weren't. There it was. The comparison. The quiet scoreboard he'd been keeping for years. I held his gaze. You don't get to decide what counted, I said. I already have. There was a pause. Then I noticed it. Behind the headstone, just barely visible, a section of soil that looked wrong. Not freshly dug, but not settled either. Disturbed, subtly, carelessly. Daniel, I said, my voice softening in a way that made him relax for half a second. What did you do? His expression didn't change fast enough. What are you talking about? I nodded toward the back of the stone. That. He didn't look. I don't know what you think you're seeing. Did you bury something there? His jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. Answer the question. I don't owe you that. And that was when I understood something. Not fully, not yet, but enough to feel it settle into my chest. This wasn't about grief. This wasn't even about me. There was something else here, something he didn't want touched. I'll see you next Sunday, I said. You won't. I will. If you come back, he said, his voice lower now, I'll make it very uncomfortable for you. I met his eyes again. You already are. And then I walked away. But I didn't forget what I saw. I couldn't, because the ground behind that stone wasn't just disturbed, it was deliberate, and whatever Daniel thought he had buried, it hadn't disappeared. There are only a few moments in childhood that define the shape of your relationship with someone. With Daniel, it was always the same pattern. He spoke. I adjusted. The first time I remember it clearly, I was 8. He was 12. Our father had bought a new set of tools, expensive ones, neatly arranged in a case he kept locked in the garage. Don't touch those, Daniel told me. I won't, I said. Later that day, our father found one missing. Who took the screwdriver? He asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. She did. I remember the way our father looked at me, not angry, just disappointed, like he had expected better, but not enough to question it. I didn't, I said. Then where is it? Daniel asked, calm, certain. I didn't have an answer, because I hadn't taken it. But Daniel had already created the version of events that mattered. I got grounded, he got believed, that was the first time. The second was subtler. I was 16, he was 20. Our father had started a small logistics business, nothing huge, but stable, growing. Daniel worked there part-time. I helped with paperwork after school. One evening, our father called me into his office. Did you misfile the client contracts? He asked. No, they were out of order. I organized them exactly how you asked. Daniel leaned against the door frame. I saw her rushing earlier, he said. She probably didn't double-check. I turned to him. I did double-check. Our father sighed. Just fix it next time. That was it. No argument, no investigation, just quiet correction. Daniel didn't smirk. He didn't need to. He had already learned something important. You don't have to prove anything if people expect you to be right. The third moment came years later. Our father was in the hospital. Not critically, at least not at first. I visited in the evenings after work. Daniel was there during the day. One night I walked in and found them laughing. And then she said she'd handle the accounts, Daniel was saying. You should have seen it. Our father chuckled. She always tries to take on more than she can handle. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have. I heard that, I said. Daniel glanced at me. We're just talking. About me. It's not a big deal. Our father smiled in that way that dismissed things without addressing them. Come in, he said. I did. But something shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Because in that moment, I realized something I should have understood earlier. Daniel wasn't competing with me. He was positioning me. And our father allowed it. After the funeral, everything became quieter. Not peaceful, just reorganized. Daniel took control of the business almost immediately. Temporarily, he said, until things settle. I didn't argue, not because I agreed, because I recognized the pattern. I stayed quiet. That was always my role. At first it seemed reasonable. He handled operations, I handled administrative work, but slowly the boundaries shifted. I'll take care of the financial decisions, he said one afternoon. Why? I asked. Because someone has to be accountable. I've been doing the accounts for years, and I've been managing the business. That's not the same thing. It's close enough. I watched him as he spoke. There was no aggression, just certainty, like the outcome had already been decided. Fine, I said. He nodded once, conversation over. But that wasn't the worst part. A few weeks later, I noticed something strange. Certain files, contracts, payment records were no longer accessible. Did you move the financial documents? I asked. Yes. Where? I reorganized the system. I can't find them. You don't need to. I paused. What does that mean? It means I'm handling that now. You didn't discuss this with me. I didn't think I needed to. There it was again, that same quiet dismissal. I've been part of this business since the beginning, I said. And you still are, he replied. Just in a different capacity. What capacity is that? Support. I let that sit between us. Support, I repeated. He didn't respond, because he didn't need to. He had already redefined my role, and unless I challenged it, loudly, publicly, it would become permanent. They thought that was the end of it. It wasn't, because a few days later I received an email from Daniel. Subject line, updated ownership structure. I opened it slowly. Attached was a document, legal, formal, revised shareholder distribution, his name, majority, mine, reduced. Significantly, I stared at it for a long time before walking into his office. You changed the ownership? I asked. Yes. When? Recently. Without telling me? I'm telling you now. That's not the same thing. It's already filed. With whose authorization? He looked at me evenly. Ours. I didn't sign anything. You didn't need to. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Explain that. You were listed as a passive stakeholder. I was never passive. That's not how it was documented. Documented by who? He didn't answer directly. Look, he said. This is just how things have to be right now. Why? Because the business needs stability. And I don't provide that. He hesitated. Just slightly. It's not personal. That was the moment I understood something else. When someone says it's not personal, it usually is. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just nodded. Okay, I said. And I left. Because reacting would have given him something to work with. Silence, on the other hand, leaves space. And space makes people comfortable. Too comfortable. The next Sunday, I went back to the grave. Of course I did. Daniel was already there. I told you not to come, he said without turning around. I remember. And you came anyway. Yes, he exhaled slowly. You're making this harder than it needs to be. For who? For everyone. There is no everyone, Daniel. It's just you. He turned then. That's not true. Then who else has a problem with me being here? He didn't answer, because there wasn't anyone else. There never was. You're trying to control something you don't own, I said. This is about respect. No, I said, it's about control. His jaw tightened. You always think there's some bigger agenda. And you always pretend there isn't. There was a long pause. Then he stepped closer. If you keep coming here, he said quietly, I will take further action. I tilted my head slightly. What kind of action? Legal. That made me pause. Legal? I repeated. Yes. For visiting my father's grave? For harassment. I almost smiled. On what basis? You've been warned. That's not how harassment works. It is if I document it properly. There it was again. Documentation. Structure. A control. I glanced behind the headstone. The disturbed soil was still there, unchanged, waiting. If you're still watching, I appreciate you more than you know, I murmured under my breath. Subscribe if you haven't already. It's free, and tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. Daniel frowned. What? Nothing. I stepped around him, and this time I didn't just look. I knelt, reached out, and pressed my fingers lightly into the earth. It was softer than it should have been, recently disturbed, not weeks ago, not months, recently. Stop, Daniel said. I didn't. What did you bury here? I asked. Nothing. That's not true. You're imagining things. I stood slowly. No, I said. I'm noticing things. He didn't respond, but his silence was different now. Tighter, more careful. And that was when I knew. This wasn't just about keeping me away. It was about keeping me from finding something. And whatever it was, it mattered enough for him to change ownership documents, threaten legal action, and rewrite history. So I did the only thing I hadn't done before. I stopped arguing. I stopped questioning him directly, and I started paying attention. Because if Daniel had buried something behind our father's grave, then eventually, he'd have to come back for it. I didn't confront him again that day. I let him think the warning had worked. That was the first shift. Not dramatic, not visible, but deliberate. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to correct him. I was trying to understand him. There's a difference. The following week, I didn't go to the cemetery. I knew he would notice. Daniel relied on patterns, predictability. That was how he built control, by knowing what people would do before they did it. So I removed myself from his expectations. On Sunday morning, instead of driving to the cemetery, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a blank document staring back at me. I started listing everything I knew. Not assumptions, not feelings, facts, dates, conversations, documents I'd seen, documents I hadn't, patterns. Daniel liked systems, which meant he left trails. He just assumed no one was patient enough to follow them. I was. Monday morning, I went into the office like nothing had changed. Daniel glanced up when I walked in. You didn't go yesterday, he said. It wasn't a question. No, I replied, setting my bag down. He studied me for a second. Good. That was all. No follow-up, no suspicion. Just quiet confirmation that his boundary had worked. I nodded slightly and sat at my desk. I stayed quiet. That part wasn't new, but the reason behind it was. Over the next few days, I started noticing small things. Daniel kept his office door closed more often. He took phone calls outside. He printed documents instead of keeping everything digital. At first, it seemed like standard caution. Then I realized something else. He wasn't hiding everything, just specific things, which meant whatever he was protecting had a clear boundary, and boundaries can be mapped. Wednesday afternoon, I walked past his office and paused. He was inside, speaking quietly. "No, that's already handled," he was saying. "It's not going to be an issue." A pause. "I said it's taken care of." Another pause. "Yes, behind the—" He stopped. Silence. Then the door opened. He looked at me. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Not fear, recognition. "You need something?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." He held my gaze a moment longer than necessary, then nodded once and closed the door again. That was the first time he adjusted his behavior because of me. It wouldn't be the last. That night, I didn't go home right away. I stayed late, waited, watched. One by one, the lights in the building went off. Desks emptied, conversations faded, until it was just me and Daniel. I heard his office door open around 8:30. Footsteps, measured, controlled. He walked past my desk without stopping. "You're still here," he said. "Finishing something." He nodded. "Don't stay too late." "I won't." He left. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Then I stood, grabbed my keys, and followed. He didn't go home. That was the first thing I noticed. Instead, he drove in the opposite direction, toward the cemetery. I stayed back, keeping distance, letting other cars pass between us. He didn't check his mirrors. He didn't need to. He believed I wasn't coming anymore. That belief was doing half the work for me. The cemetery was quiet when we arrived. Darker than usual, no visitors, no movement, just the sound of gravel under tires. Daniel parked near the far edge. I stayed further back, cutting the engine before the headlights fully illuminated the path. He got out, walked directly toward our father's grave. No hesitation, no pause, like he had done this before, many times. I waited, watched, from a distance that kept me invisible. He reached the headstone, looked around briefly, then crouched and started digging. Not with tools, with his hands, fast, practiced, like he knew exactly where to reach. My chest tightened, not from shock, from confirmation. This wasn't accidental, this wasn't recent, this was routine. After a few moments, he pulled something out. Small, rectangular, wrapped in plastic. He brushed dirt off it quickly, stood and glanced around again. I stepped back slightly, keeping myself in shadow. He didn't see me. He slipped the object into his jacket. Then, this was important, he didn't leave immediately. He adjusted the soil, carefully. Smoothed it out, pressed it down, reconstructed the surface, like he was restoring a scene. That told me everything I needed to know. Whatever he had buried there, it wasn't meant to stay hidden forever. It was meant to be retrieved, repeatedly. I didn't confront him. Not then. Not when he left. Not when I followed him back, because confrontation would have ended the pattern, and I needed the pattern. The next morning, I arrived at the office before him, sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and waited. He walked in at 9:02, same as always, same pace, same expression. "You're early," he said. "So are you." He nodded once and went into his office. I listened. The door closed. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of a drawer opening, then closing, locked. That was new. At 9:30, I knocked on his door. "Come in." I stepped inside. "I need access to the vendor contracts," I said. "They're handled. I still need to review them." "For what? Quarterly reconciliation?" "I'll send you what you need. I'd rather see the full files." He leaned back slightly. "That's not necessary." "It is for my process." He studied me. "You're still doing that?" "What?" "Acting like you have oversight." There it was again. Subtle, dismissive, controlled. I held his gaze. I'm doing my job. Your job has changed. Without my agreement. With my authority. And what authority is that? He didn't answer directly. He didn't have to. We both knew what he meant. I'll send you the summaries, he said. That's not enough. It is. Silence. Then I nodded. Okay. And I left. Because pushing now would have been premature. He had something. I just didn't know what yet. That afternoon, I checked the shared drives, looked for gaps, missing files, inconsistencies, and I found them. Small at first, then larger. Payments that didn't align, contracts that referenced versions I couldn't access, dates that overlapped in ways that didn't make sense. It wasn't obvious, but it was there, a pattern. And patterns don't lie. By Thursday, I had enough to be certain of one thing. Daniel wasn't just controlling the business. He was altering it, quietly, deliberately, and whatever he had buried behind that headstone was connected. Friday afternoon, he called a meeting, just the two of us. I've been reviewing your recent work, he said, and it's inconsistent. In what way? You're overstepping. I'm doing what I've always done. That's the problem. I folded my hands in front of me. Be specific. You're requesting access to files that aren't relevant to your role. They are relevant. Not anymore. And who decided that? I did. There was a pause. Then he added, you need to adjust. To what? To the current structure, which you created. Yes, without consultation, with necessity. I watched him, listened carefully, because this wasn't just about authority, this was about justification. He needed me to accept the new structure, to validate it. I understand, I said. He blinked. What? I understand. That's it? Yes. Something shifted in his expression. Confusion, maybe, or suspicion. Okay, he said slowly. Okay, I stood. Anything else? No. I nodded once and left. Because agreement, even false agreement, is one of the most effective ways to lower someone's guard. And Daniel's guard was already built on the assumption that I would resist. So I didn't. Sunday came again, and this time I went back. Early, before sunrise. The cemetery was empty. Still, the air colder than usual. I walked directly to the grave. Stopped. Looked at the ground behind the headstone. It had been disturbed again. Not as roughly as before, but enough. He had come back. More than once. I crouched, pressed my fingers into the soil, still soft, still recent, and then, slowly, carefully, I started to dig. Not much, just enough to understand. A few inches down, my fingers brushed against something solid. Plastic. My pulse slowed, not quickened, because this wasn't surprise anymore. This was confirmation. I pulled it out. Another package, similar size, similar wrapping, different. He hadn't taken everything. He had left something behind. I sat back on my heels, staring at it, not opening it, not yet, because sometimes knowing something exists is more powerful than knowing what it is. Footsteps. I looked up. Daniel, standing a few feet away, watching me. For the first time, he didn't speak immediately. You came back, he said finally. Yes. His eyes dropped to the object in my hand, then back to me. That wasn't yours to touch. I think it was, I said. Silence. Then he stepped closer. Give it to me. No. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what you're doing. Then explain it. I don't need to explain anything. Then I don't need to give it back. Another pause. Longer this time, more dangerous. Do you have any idea what that is? He asked. I have a few guesses. You're wrong. Maybe. Give it to me. No. We stood there, neither moving, neither raising our voices, just holding position. And for the first time in my life, Daniel didn't look certain. Not completely, not comfortably, because the one thing he had always relied on, my compliance, was gone. And whatever he had buried behind that stone was no longer just his secret. He didn't lunge for it. That would have been easier to handle. Instead, Daniel did what he had always done. He recalibrated. "You shouldn't open that," he said, quieter now. I tilted my head slightly. "That's not the same as explaining what it is. It's not for you. It's behind our father's grave. That doesn't make it yours." "No," I said, "but it does make it relevant." His eyes narrowed, not in anger but in calculation. "Give it to me," he repeated. I stood slowly, the plastic-wrapped object still in my hand, feeling its weight. Not heavy, but not empty either. "What happens if I don't?" I asked. A pause, then carefully. "Things get complicated." "They already are." Another pause. "You don't understand the position you're putting yourself in." "I think I do." "Then you're making a mistake." "Then stop me." Silence. He looked at me for a long moment, and then something subtle shifted in his posture. Not surrender, but strategy. "Fine," he said. "Keep it." That wasn't what I expected. "Really?" "Yes." "Just like that?" "For now." That last part mattered. "For now," I repeated. He nodded once. "But you're going to regret it." I almost smiled. "Maybe," I said. And then I turned and walked away. Not quickly, not defensively, just steadily, because I knew something he didn't yet realize. The moment he let me walk away with that, he lost control of the timeline. I didn't open it immediately. That was intentional. Information is leverage, but only if you control when it's used. I went home. I placed the package on my kitchen table, made coffee, sat down, and looked at it. For a long time. It wasn't sealed professionally, just layered plastic, wrapped tight, carefully, like something meant to survive exposure or conceal something fragile. Finally, I reached for it, paused, then stopped, because something else mattered more than curiosity. Context. If Daniel had buried multiple packages, then this wasn't the whole story. It was a piece, and opening a piece too early can limit how you understand the whole. So instead, I did something else. I called a lawyer. Her name was Elise. We'd met years ago, briefly, through a business contract review. I remembered two things about her. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, people stopped interrupting. "I need to ask a hypothetical question," I said when she answered. "They're rarely hypothetical," she replied. "That's fair." A pause. "Go on." "If someone alters ownership documents in a privately held business without the other party's knowledge or consent, what would that imply?" "Depends," she said. "Was there prior authorization, power of attorney, conditional clauses?" "Not that I'm aware of." "Then it implies either fraud or that you missed something in your original agreement." "I didn't miss anything." "Most people say that." "I'm not most people." A pause. "All right," she said. "Then we'd need to look at the original structure." "And if there were additional documents, ones I wasn't aware of?" "That would change things." "How?" "It would mean someone planned ahead." "For what?" "For control." I leaned back in my chair. "And if that someone buried physical evidence?" Another pause. Longer this time. "That's no longer hypothetical," she said. "No." "Do you have it?" "Yes." "Don't open it yet." "I wasn't planning to." "Good." Silence. Then she added, "When can you come in?" "Tomorrow." "Bring everything." "I will." "And don't tell anyone." "I won't." I ended the call, looked at the package again, and for the first time since I picked it up, I felt something close to anticipation, not for what was inside, but for what it meant. The next morning, Daniel didn't mention it. Not once. Not in passing, not indirectly, nothing. That was deliberate. He was waiting, watching, trying to determine what I knew, and more importantly, what I didn't. I played along, answered emails, reviewed documents, kept my movements predictable, because unpredictability invites scrutiny, and I wasn't ready for that yet. At noon, I left the office. "I have an appointment," I told him. He looked up briefly. "With who?" "Personal." He held my gaze for a second, then nodded. "Don't be long." I won't. And just like that, he let me go. Elise's office was exactly how I remembered it. Minimal, ordered, no wasted space. She didn't greet me with small talk. "Show me," she said. I placed the package on her desk. She didn't touch it immediately. "Where did you find this?" "Behind my father's grave." She raised an eyebrow slightly. "That's specific." "Yes." "And your brother buried it?" "Yes." She nodded once. "All right." She reached for gloves, put them on, then carefully unwrapped the plastic, layer by layer. Neither of us spoke. The sound of it, the faint tearing, the shifting, felt louder than it should have. Finally, the last layer came off. Inside, documents. Unknot loose, organized, bound. Elise opened the folder, flipped through the first few pages, then stopped, looked up at me. "Did you know about this?" "No." She turned the folder slightly, so I could see. My name, my signature, on documents I had never seen. My chest tightened. "That's not my signature," I said. "It's close. It's not mine." "I believe you." She flipped another page. "And this," she said, "is why he buried it." "What is it?" "A revised ownership agreement." "I saw that." "No," she said. "You saw the result. This is the mechanism." I leaned forward. "Explain." She tapped a section. "This clause transfers controlling interest under specific conditions." "What conditions?" She looked at me. "Demonstrated instability, lack of involvement, financial inconsistency." I stared at her. "He built a case." "Yes." "Without telling me." "Yes." "And used this to justify changing the ownership." "Yes." Silence. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "Is it valid?" She paused. Then, "That depends." "On what?" "On whether these documents were properly executed." "They weren't." "You're sure?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Then we have a problem." "For him?" "For both of you." I frowned. "Explain." "If he filed this and used it to alter the business structure, then from a legal standpoint, it exists." "But it's fraudulent." "Possibly. Possibly. We'd need to prove that." "I can." "Good." She closed the folder. "But that's not all." "What do you mean?" She opened another section. "These aren't just ownership documents." "What else is there?" "Financial transfers." My stomach tightened. "What kind of transfers?" She met my eyes. "The kind that shouldn't be hidden behind a grave." I didn't speak for a moment, because suddenly, this wasn't just about control, or manipulation, or even the business. This was something else, something deeper. "What did he do?" I asked quietly. Elise didn't answer immediately. She turned a few more pages, then stopped. "There are accounts here that don't match your company's records," she said. "How many?" "Enough to matter." "And the money?" "Moved." "Where?" "Off the books." I sat back slowly. "And this is all documented here?" "Yes." "Then why bury it?" "Because keeping it accessible digitally would leave a trail." "And this doesn't?" "It does," she said. "But only if someone knows where to look." I let that settle, then asked, "Why multiple packages?" She looked at me. "You found more than one?" "I found one, but I saw him retrieve another." She nodded. "Then this is a system." "For what?" "For control," she said, "and protection." "From who?" "From exposure." Silence. Then she added, "He didn't expect you to find this." "No. But now that you have—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to, because we both understood what came next. I didn't go back to the office that afternoon. I needed space, time, distance, because the shape of everything had changed. This wasn't just sibling conflict anymore. It was legal, financial, intentional, and buried, literally, beneath grief. That night, Daniel called. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Hello? You went somewhere today." "Yes." "Where?" "Out." A pause. "You met with someone." "Yes." Another pause. "Did you open it?" I leaned against the counter. "Yes." Silence. Then, and? And what? What did you see? I smiled slightly. That depends. On what? On what you're asking. Another pause. Longer this time. Then carefully, what do you want? There it was. Not denial, not anger, negotiation. I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them. I want the truth, I said. You wouldn't understand it. Try me. A quiet exhale on the other end. Then, come to the office tomorrow, he said. We'll talk. Will we? Yes. Or will you explain just enough to maintain control? Silence. Then, tomorrow, he repeated, and he hung up. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was anxious, because I was thinking, reconstructing, mapping everything I knew against everything I had just learned. And for the first time, the pattern wasn't just clear, it was complete. The next morning I arrived early, again. Daniel was already there, standing by the window, waiting. You shouldn't have taken it, he said without turning around, and you shouldn't have buried it. He turned then. You don't know what you're dealing with. I know enough. No, he said. You don't. Then explain it. A pause. Then he walked to his desk, sat down, folded his hands, and for the first time in years, he didn't look like he was in control. You're going to listen, he said, and you're not going to interrupt. I didn't sit. Try me. He held my gaze, then nodded once, and started talking. And as he did, everything I thought I understood shifted. You think this is about the business, Daniel said. His voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't even tense. Oh, it was measured, like he had rehearsed this, or at least anticipated the moment. It started that way, I replied. Then I saw the accounts. He gave a slight nod. Of course you did. I didn't sit. I stayed where I was, near the door. Not confrontational, just unwilling to settle into a position that implied agreement. Then explain it, I said. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You remember the audit 3 years ago? Yes. What do you remember about it? That it was routine. It wasn't. I didn't respond. He continued. There were discrepancies, small ones, at first. In what? Vendor payments, routing delays, duplicate entries. And they weren't random. I crossed my arms slightly. You're saying someone was siphoning money. I'm saying someone was testing the system. Who? He hesitated. Then, Dad. The word sat between us longer than it should have. No, I said quietly. Yes. That doesn't make sense. It didn't to me either, Daniel replied. Not at first. I shook my head. He built that business, and he nearly destroyed it. Silence. You're wrong, I said. I'm not. Then prove it. He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a folder, set it on the table between us. Open it. I didn't move immediately. Is this another buried version of the truth? I asked. No, he said. This is the part I didn't bury. That mattered. I stepped forward, opened the folder. Inside, copies, printed statements, highlighted transactions, dates I recognized, clients I knew, amounts that didn't align. This is real? I asked. Yes. And you've had this, how long? Since the audit. And you didn't tell me. No. Why? Because I didn't know how deep it went. I looked up at him. And now? I do. I flipped another page. More transfers. More inconsistencies. But this doesn't explain the buried documents, I said. It does, he replied. You're just not there yet. I closed the folder slowly. Then get me there. He exhaled. After the audit, I started looking closer. Quietly. I didn't want to trigger anything. Trigger what? Exposure. Of him? Yes. I stared at him. You're telling me Dad was stealing from his own company. I'm telling you he was moving money. That's the same thing. No, Daniel said. It's not. Then what is it? He leaned forward slightly. It's protection. For who? For us. I I frowned. That doesn't make sense. It didn't to me either, he said, until I found the second set of records. My chest tightened. The buried ones. Yes, and they don't just show missing money, he said. They show where it went. I held his gaze. Where? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said, Do you remember the lawsuit? What lawsuit? Exactly. A pause. Then it clicked. There wasn't one, I said. There almost was. I felt something shift, subtle but real. Explain. A supplier, Daniel said. 3 years ago, they claimed breach of contract, misrepresentation, fraud. And Dad settled it. Out of court? Yes. Why didn't I know about this? Because he made sure you didn't. Why? Because the claim had merit. Silence. That's not possible, I said. It is. And the money was redirected, Daniel said. Off the books, into accounts that couldn't be traced back to the company. I stared at him. So he was hiding assets? Yes. To avoid liability? Yes. And you… what? Took over? I contained it. How? By restructuring everything. And cutting me out. I didn't cut you out, he said. I protected you. By forging my signature? I didn't forge anything. That's not my signature. It's authorized. By who? He hesitated. Then, by Dad. The room went quiet. That's not possible, I said. He set it up before he died. No. Yes. You're lying. I'm not. I stepped closer. Then show me. He reached for another document. This one older, worn, folded. He slid it across the desk. I didn't want to touch it, but I did. My name again. But this time, there was a date. Earlier. Before everything changed. Before the hospital. Before the audit. What is this? I asked. Contingency authorization, Daniel said. For what? For me to act on behalf of the business, if certain conditions were met. What conditions? He looked at me. Operational risk, financial instability, or absence of leadership. I felt my throat tighten. Absence of leadership, I repeated. Yes. And he defined that as what? Daniel didn't answer directly. He defined it as what he thought it would be, he said. That's not an answer. No, he agreed, it's not. I looked back at the document, at the signature, at the date. You knew about this, I said. Yes. And you waited. Yes. For what? For it to become necessary. And you decided when that was. Yes. Silence. Then I asked the question that had been building since the beginning. What were you really burying? Daniel? He didn't look away. The truth, he said. That's not an answer. It is, he replied. Just not the one you want. I shook my head. No, I said. The truth doesn't get buried behind a grave. This one did. Why? Because if it surfaced too early, it would have destroyed everything. And now, he held my gaze. Now it might. I didn't speak for a long time after that, because the structure of everything had shifted again. Not cleanly, not clearly, but enough to make certainty. Uncomfortable. You should have told me, I said finally. I couldn't. You chose not to. Yes. Why? Because you would have reacted. And you wouldn't? I didn't have the luxury. I let that sit. You think I would have made things worse. I think you would have made them visible. And that's worse. Yes. Silence. Then I said, You still moved money. Yes. Without telling me. Yes. You still altered ownership. Yes. You still buried documents. Yes. And you still tried to keep me away from it. Yes. I nodded slowly. Then don't pretend this was just protection. He didn't respond. Because he couldn't. Because both things could be true. And that was the problem. I'm not giving it back, I said. I didn't ask you to. You tried. I reconsidered. Why? Because now you're involved. I was always involved. Not like this. A pause. Then what happens now? I asked. He leaned back again. That depends. On what? On what you do next. And what do you expect me to do? Nothing. I almost laughed. That's not going to happen. I know. Silence. Then he said, but you should think carefully. About what? About consequences. For who? For everyone. There is no everyone, Daniel. There is now. I walked out of his office without another word, because there was nothing left to say in that room, not yet, not until I decided what mattered more, the version of the truth he had constructed, or the one I was still uncovering. That afternoon, I went back to Elise. She was right, I said as soon as I sat down. They usually are, she replied. He has a document. What kind? Contingency authorization, signed by my father. She nodded slowly. Did you verify it? Not yet. Then we do that first. And if it's real, then his actions may be legally protected. And if it's not, then they're not. I leaned forward. There's more. There usually is. He says my father was moving money to protect the company from a lawsuit. And you believe him? I don't know. Good, she said. Don't decide yet. I have the buried documents. And they show transfers. To where? Accounts I don't recognize. She nodded. Then we trace them. And if they lead somewhere illegal? She met my eyes. Then we decide how far you want to go. I sat there, absorbing that, because this was the line. Not emotional, not personal, legal, strategic, irreversible. What would you do? I asked. Elise didn't hesitate. I'd find out everything first, and then I'd decide who deserves the truth. That night, I went back to the cemetery. Not because I needed answers, because I needed perspective. The grave looked the same, quiet, still, uninvolved. Like none of this had anything to do with the man buried beneath it. I stood there for a long time, then crouched, touched the ground behind the stone. It was firm now, undisturbed, for the moment. You planned all of this, I said quietly. Not to Daniel, not even to myself, to the silence, to the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. And as I stood there, something settled. Not clarity, not certainty, just direction. Because whatever the truth was, it wasn't buried anymore, and neither was I. The next move wasn't emotional. That mattered. Because if I reacted to Daniel as a brother, I would lose. If I responded to him as a variable, I had a chance. Monday morning, I didn't go straight to the office. I went to the bank, not ours. One of the names listed in the buried documents, a branch I had never visited before. On a neutral ground. I sat across from a woman who introduced herself as Miriam. What can I help you with today? She asked. I need to verify an account, I said. Are you an authorized signatory? I don't know. She paused. That's something we can check. I slid a copy of one of the documents across the desk. Her eyes moved over it slowly. Then she looked up. This account exists, she said. I assumed it did. And your name is attached. My chest tightened slightly. In what capacity? Secondary authorization. Who is primary? She hesitated. I can't disclose that without proper clearance. I nodded. That's fine. Silence. Then I asked, has the account been active recently? Another pause. Then, yes. How recently? Within the last week. That aligned. Daniel had gone back. Again. Thank you, I said. That's all? For now. I stood, collected the document, and left. Because confirmation was enough. For now. At the office, Daniel was already inside his office. Door closed. That was becoming a pattern. I didn't knock. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and started working. Normal, predictable, controlled. At 10:15, his door opened. You went somewhere this morning, he said. I didn't look up immediately. Yes. Where? Out. A pause. You're not going to tell me. No. He stood there for a moment, then, "You're making this harder." "For who?" "For yourself." I finally looked up. "I don't think I am." He held my gaze, then nodded once. "All right." And he walked away. That was new. He didn't push, which meant one of two things. He was confident, or he was adjusting. It's either way, he wasn't in full control anymore. By midday, I had a clearer picture, not complete, but structured. There were at least 3 accounts, all connected, all partially hidden, all active, and all tied, directly or indirectly, to Daniel and me. That part still didn't sit right. Why include my name? Why risk that? Unless it wasn't a risk, it was a shield. I called Elise. "I need to understand something," I said. "Go on." "If someone attaches another person's name to an account without their full awareness, what does that do legally?" "It depends," she said. "Is the person actually unaware or just uninformed?" "Uninformed." "Then it creates shared exposure." I leaned against my desk. "Meaning?" "Meaning if anything goes wrong, both parties are responsible." I closed my eyes briefly. "So he didn't just protect himself?" "No," she said. "He tied you to it." "Why?" "Control," she replied, "and leverage." That word settled heavily. Leverage. That afternoon, Daniel called another meeting. Not just with me, it's the ones not listed here. A pause. Our accountant looked between us. "I'm not aware of any external accounts," he said. Daniel smiled slightly. "There aren't any that impact this report." "That's not what I asked," I said. The room shifted, subtly, but noticeably. Daniel leaned back. "Now isn't the time for that discussion." "When is?" "Later." "When later?" "After we finalize this." I held his gaze. No. Silence. Our accountant cleared his throat slightly. "Is there something we should be aware of?" he asked. Daniel didn't look at him. He looked at me. "Not at this stage," he said. I nodded slowly. "All right." And I let it go. Because this wasn't the moment. Not yet. They thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. That evening, I went back to the cemetery again. Not to dig, not to search, just to observe patterns, timing, a behavior. Because Daniel wasn't just reacting. He was maintaining something, and maintenance requires routine. I stayed in my car, watched, waited. At 8:47, he arrived, same as before, parked in the same spot, walked the same path, crouched in the same place. But this time, he didn't dig. He just checked, pressed the soil, looked around, then stood and left. That told me something important. He knew something had changed. He just didn't know what. The next day, I made a decision. Not emotional, strategic. I requested a formal review, with legal present, neutral ground, structured, documented. Daniel didn't refuse. He couldn't, not without raising questions. "Fine," he said. "Let's do it properly." "Good," I replied. Because this was the shift, from private tension to public accountability. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Elise would be there. Our accountant, a mediator, and Daniel. Everything aligned, everything structured, everything visible. Thursday morning, I arrived early. Again, not nervous, not anxious, just ready. Daniel walked in a few minutes later. "You're serious about this?" he said. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "All right." That was it. No argument, no resistance, which meant he believed he could manage it, control it, contain it. He always believed that. The conference room was neutral, glass walls, minimal distractions, everything designed to keep things professional. Elise sat beside me, calm, prepared. Daniel sat across, composed, our accountant to his right, the mediator at the head of the table. "Let's begin," the mediator said. And just like that, everything shifted. "Can you outline the concern?" the mediator asked. I didn't rush, didn't dramatize, just stated facts. There are accounts not reflected in our official records, I said. They are active. They involve transferred funds, and my name is attached without my full awareness. Silence. The mediator nodded. Daniel? He leaned forward slightly. There are external accounts, he said. They were created as part of a protective structure. For what purpose? The mediator asked. To shield the company from potential liability. Was this structure disclosed to all stakeholders? No. Why not? Because premature disclosure would have created risk. I spoke. Risk to who? To the business. And to you? I asked. A pause. Also to me, he said. Honest. That mattered. Were documents used to authorize this structure? Elise asked. Yes. Can we see them? Daniel hesitated, then reached into his briefcase, pulled out a folder, set it on the table. Elise, I said quietly. She opened it, reviewed, carefully, then looked up. These documents require verification, she said. Of course, Daniel replied. Because if they're not valid, she continued. They are, he said. That remains to be seen. Silence. Then Elise added, There's also the matter of financial transfers. Daniel nodded. Yes. Can you account for all of them? Yes. Then do it. The room stilled. Daniel didn't rush, didn't panic. He opened another document, placed it down, and began explaining, step by step, transaction by transaction, structure by structure. And as he spoke, the shape of everything became clearer. Not cleaner, not better, but clearer. This wasn't just protection, I said finally. No, Daniel replied. It was control. Yes. And you tied me to it. Yes. Without telling me. Yes. Silence. Then I asked, Why? He met my eyes. Because you were the only one I trusted not to expose it. That landed differently than I expected. Not as justification, but as strategy. You didn't trust me, I said. I trusted your behavior. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed. It's not. The mediator leaned forward. At this point, he said, we need to determine next steps. Elise spoke. We verify the documents, she said. We audit the accounts, and we assess legal exposure. Daniel nodded. Agreed. And ownership? I asked. That was the final piece, the one everything circled around. The mediator looked between us. Oh, that will depend on the findings. I leaned back slightly, calm, controlled, because the truth wasn't hidden anymore. It was unfolding, and for the first time, Daniel wasn't ahead of it. He was inside it, just like me. And that was the difference. He had built everything on control. I had built everything on understanding. And now, only one of those could hold. The audit didn't happen all at once. It unfolded, quietly, deliberately, like everything else Daniel had built, and like everything I had learned to recognize. For the first few days, nothing dramatic happened. No confrontations, no accusations, just requests, documents, clarifications. Elise handled most of it. Don't rush this, she told me. Precision matters more than speed. I know, I said. Do you? Yes. She studied me for a moment. You're not trying to win, she said. No. Good, she replied, because that's how people make mistakes. Daniel didn't avoid me. That would have been easier. Instead, he stayed exactly where he always had been, present, available, controlled. You're going through everything, he said one afternoon, standing in the doorway of my office. Yes, thoroughly. Yes, he nodded once. That's fair. I looked up at him. Is it? Yes, because you didn't give me that same courtesy. He didn't react to the accusation. I gave you protection, he said. You gave me exposure. A pause. Both can be true. Yes, I said, but only one of them was your intention. He didn't answer that. Because he couldn't. By the end of the week, the structure was clear. Not emotionally. Logically, there were 3 layers. The visible business, clean, stable. Inconsistent. The secondary accounts, buffered, redirected, controlled, and beneath that, the buried documentation, the part that explained everything and implicated everything. Elise, I said during our third review meeting, if these documents are invalid, they collapse, she said, and the transfers become unprotected, and the liability expands. To who? She looked at me carefully. To everyone involved. I nodded slowly. So if I expose this, you expose yourself too. There it was, the final piece. Not revenge, not correction, consequence, shared. That night I sat alone in my apartment. No laptop, no documents, just silence. Because for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't trying to figure anything out. I already knew. Daniel hadn't just controlled the narrative. He had built a system where truth itself had a cost. And now, so did revealing it. The following Monday, the final review was scheduled. Formal, documented, complete. Everything would be presented. Everything would be verified. Everything would be decided. That morning, Daniel arrived before me. Again, standing by the window, again. You're going to go through with it, he said. Yes, he nodded slowly, even knowing what it means. Yes, for you too. Yes. Silence. Then he said, you could still walk away. I could, I agreed. And I won't. He turned to face me fully. Why? I held his gaze. Because you made the decision for both of us when you buried it. A pause. That wasn't the moment, he said. No, I replied. That was just when I saw it. The conference room felt different this time. Not neutral, final. Elise sat beside me, the mediator across, Daniel opposite, our accountant present, everything in place. Let's proceed, the mediator said. And we did. Elise began, clear, structured, precise. These documents, she said, placing copies on the table, show unauthorized structural changes to ownership. Daniel didn't interrupt. They also demonstrate the creation of external financial channels not disclosed to all stakeholders. Still nothing. And finally, she said, they raise questions about the validity of the authorization used to justify these changes. She looked at Daniel. Would you like to respond? He leaned forward slightly. Yes. No hesitation, no defensiveness, just acceptance. The structure was created intentionally, he said, to protect the business from potential legal exposure. Was the authorization valid? The mediator asked. Daniel paused. Then, it was signed. That's not the question. Another pause. Then, no, he said. Silence. Not loud, not dramatic, just complete. Clarify, the mediator said. The signature was facilitated, Daniel replied. Facilitated how? He looked at me, then back at the mediator. It wasn't executed in her presence. That's not facilitation, Elise said quietly. That's fabrication. Daniel didn't argue. Yes, he said. The word landed without resistance, without excuse, just acknowledgement. I didn't react, not outwardly, because this was the moment everything had been building toward. Not explosive, not emotional, just undeniable. And the financial transfers? The mediator asked. They were real, Daniel said. For the purpose stated? Yes. And documented appropriately? In the buried records. Why bury them? Because if they were discovered prematurely, the structure would collapse. And now? He exhaled slowly. Now it has. The room went quiet again. Not tense, resolved. The mediator looked at me. Do you wish to proceed with formal action? That was the question. The one everything had been moving toward. Legal, final, irreversible. I looked at Daniel. He didn't look away, didn't plead, didn't justify, just waited. And for the first time, he wasn't trying to control the outcome. He was accepting it. I thought about everything, the patterns, the control, the buried truth, the shared exposure, the cost. And then I spoke. No. The word surprised everyone, even me. The mediator leaned forward slightly. Can you clarify? Yes, I said. I don't want formal action. Elise turned her head toward me. Are you sure? Yes. Why? The mediator asked. I held Daniel's gaze for a moment longer, then said, because the structure is already broken. Silence. And, he prompted, and the truth is already on record. Daniel exhaled, barely. What are you proposing? Elise asked. I turned to her. A full restructuring, I said. Transparent, documented, equal. And the accounts? Closed, audited, reintegrated. And liability? Addressed, together. The word settled. Together. Not as siblings, as participants. Daniel nodded slowly. That's acceptable, he said. The mediator looked between us. Then we proceed with that. The meeting ended without drama. No raised voices, no declarations. Just decisions. Afterward, Daniel and I stood alone in the conference room. Neither of us moved to leave immediately. That wasn't what I expected, he said. I know. You could have ended it. I could have, and you didn't. No. Why? I considered that, then said, because ending it wouldn't have changed what happened. He nodded once. That's fair. A pause. Then he added, I was wrong. I looked at him. About what? About you. Silence. That's not new, I said. No, he agreed. It's just clearer now. We left the room separately, not because we had to, because we always had. The following weeks were quieter, not easier, but cleaner. The accounts were closed, the structure rebuilt, the ownership corrected, properly, this time. And the grave, I went back one last time, not to check, not to search, just to stand. The ground behind the stone was smooth, undisturbed, empty, as it should have been. I brushed my hand lightly over the surface, then stepped back, because whatever had been buried there wasn't anymore. If you made it this far, thank you. Truly. Subscribe if you haven't already. It's free, and tell me where you're watching from. Your presence here means more than you think.